Thank you for joining us, Minister Solomon, here in the Montreal's Rialto Theatre to talk about digital governance.
Merci. It's great to be here, and great to see so many people here.
Good. So you've been in your job now for a bit more than 150 days, and I think it's fair to say that everyone here in the room cares deeply about your mandate. They're watching you, and generously, and I think they are also understand that you have a very hard job right now. You have to, on one hand, think about how can Canada adopt AI and govern AI in a time when we have this country faces a lot of intense pressure from the US, from big tech, and so how do you and trade negotiation are happening at the same time. So how do you think about this tension now that you're 150 days in?
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Bienvenue tout le monde to this session. Look, it's a challenge. We're in a challenging environment right now. We're in a geopolitically challenging time that's in a realignment moment that we are very well aware of, that's raising new questions and asking us to develop new resiliencies, new trade partners, and raising real questions about the democratic institutions that underpin our country and the things that we value. And at the same time, and Maria and I were just talking in the deep bowels of the Rialto seconds ago, and at the same time that we are in this accelerated moment of this transformational new technology, and we've seen a movie before in the last 25 years, or 35 years really, and so we are at the very beginning of a very rapidly moving technological phenomenon, and these two things are happening simultaneously. The Prime Minister creates this new role because recognizing that AI technology, digital innovation, is not just a subset of something, but it has to, it has a vertical access where there's a whole industry that's developing. But really, life is the horizontal axis, like where this is hitting everywhere: agriculture, education, healthcare, defense, governance. So the horizontal axis is where a lot of the action's happening, and we have to make sure that we coordinate the two. And so to answer your question, how do I think about it? I always think in this way. I always think in a framework of principles, strategies, tactics. So what are the principles first and foremost? My principles of our ministry and our government, trust, so developing trust. I know we're going to talk about that. Trust, sovereignty. This is our country, so we have to reflect, project, and protect our values. I get that. But sovereignty and quality of life. Our value system, our kind of working title for our ministry right now is AI for all. AI for all is what we think about every day. And that's kind of our general principle. And then our mission on that is to develop along those lines. Our government, and we align this strategically, just so you know how we think, not just as a slogan, but as a framework of build, protect, and empower. And you can think about those as three pillars because that's the way we think. What do we need to build based on those principles? And there is an element under there of building our digital infrastructure. And I know there's lots of debate about that. We just heard someone on data centers. So there's how do we do that? And in what ways? And what are the systems? And what's their involvement? And so there's a digital infrastructure along the stack. On the build side, there's a bunch of things we need to build. Tools and Maria and I talking about LLMs and open or close. So how does that? Then there's a protect, and there's legislative elements there. We will be introducing legislation on privacy and data. You just had the privacy commissioner here, and we are ministry, and we're working closely with the privacy commissioner, developing ways on protecting data and protecting privacy. We are interested, by the way, we're not the only ones that are in the protection pillar. I should say the justice minister has talked a lot about, for example, non-consensual deep fake imagery being a new criminal code category for that kind of thing. He's spoken about that. He'll have a role. And our heritage minister will have a role with the online harms, which Taylor Owen, who's on our task force and is here, Dr. Owen, has been very active in, and many of you have been active on that. That's a heritage. So there's elements of that under the pillar. So there's a protecting children, consumers, deepfakes. There will be an element of that. So we can talk a bit about what we're thinking there. And then there's the empower side, skills, training, education. AI poses pedagogical challenges, right? One of my kids, my son goes to McGill. He's in the audience here. And if you want really smart answers, go to him. Look, universities are K-12. There's pedagogical challenges, but we need a skilled workforce. We need education. We need to empower our citizens with those critical tools. We need to empower our businesses so they can remain competitive with this tool, because it's a tool to serve us. That's what AI is. We need to empower our governments to serve us better, so we can, through healthcare. And so there's an empower element. So when you ask me, that's the framework through which we are seeing our challenge.
Thank you. So you talked a lot about what the plan is and the strategy. But how does that square with a U.S. government that basically is saying that they would like all the other countries that like to trade with them not to have any legislation, or really to protect their big tech companies? So how do you go forward, especially on legislation in that context then?
Well, I mean, we're a sovereign country, so, they have their ideas and we have our ideas. So I recognize that China and the United States have a view of this technology where any form of regulation is a constraint on their national security and their innovation. Right. Then there are other models, the European model, that they have a model on regulation that has worked in some ways, and some have criticized it for being too stifling on innovation. And you're seeing debate in Europe. Canada tried to do some AI legislation on a bill called C-27, which was an attempt to not only update our privacy legislation of 25 years, PIPEDA, and this died on the order paper, but they had bolted on an AI regulatory framework, which was very controversial and didn't pass. So I have already signaled strongly, and I will be putting down legislation, we think. I mean, there's a legislative agenda in Parliament, but this is our plan. Minority governments have their own climate. But our plan is to put down legislation to reintroduce parts of that are badly needed, like our privacy legislation, and then to add some things around deep fakes. I think Canadians are concerned about that kind of thing. We see it every day. We see it escalating every day. And what do you do about that? What are possible ways to deal with that? And I'm happy to talk about some of the things that have crossed. We want to deal with data transfer and chain of custody. We want to deal with sensitive data around children. And so those are one part of the legislative package. How the other countries may or may not regard that, we are a sovereign nation, and that is important to us. Now, there are trade implications for all of this stuff. I get that. But that's not new. We are not living in, we are living in a world that since the Second World War has been a rules-based multilateral order. And it is important that Canada stands up for a multilateral rules-based order. This is the post-war world that we want to live in and guard and not cede to any headline. I will say that there's a lot of, if you think about politics as a kind of an ocean, there's a lot of waves on the top, but beneath the surface, the animal life is swimming around and still doing what they're doing. And so, this is a deep, deep ocean. So let's not be too hasty in giving up the foundational institutions that guard our multilateral rules-based order.
Yeah. Before we come back to the domestic context and trust, do we have partners in this, especially maybe other middle powers? And how would we go about collaborating maybe with them a bit more proactively?
Well, we have lots of partners. Obviously the Europeans, across the world, there's lots of partners. I met with the UN, I've met with, in the Middle East, I was just in the Middle East. We got to be very, very careful about deciding that the world is heading in one way. It is very much in our collective interest that the United States and Canada and Latin America and the Global South and the Europeans function in a rules-based order where there are mechanisms of dispute resolution based on values that we share. I absolutely recognize we are going through a stress test moment. But we've been through stress test moments before. This is a time to be resilient. I think countries like Canada making the kinds of legislative and regulatory decisions that we want to make, working with our partners, is really important. And though they add to the resilience. Let me say another thing. For example, one of the things we're doing is on another frontier technology like quantum, where Canada's research has been very important. It's not just, our ideas, our intellectual property, our university educated, our engineers, our students, our businesses. The better they do, the more targeted they are for other destinations. The people want to poach them. So we got to keep them here because they are also part of our sovereign Canadian way of life. We need to keep our talent here, our companies here. So it's not, we're not just in a shield moment. We have many things the world wants, and many things we need to keep here, including our talent. That means a good education system, keeping our businesses here. They employ people, they build. So all those things are on our agenda. So you're right, there's a lot to do. But, I just don't want to posit things in too broad a macro way where we're talking about, is this the end of the world? But we got stuff to do now because we got to protect things and grow things in a very urgent way. So I'm just, there's a broader macro view, but there's strategic imperatives that we've got to get done now because, look, my other job, and I don't, that matters, is I'm the Minister of Federal Economic Development for Southern Ontario. So, I'm on the floor of Hooper Welding in Hamilton, where there are people that are welding, for a living, anything from turbine, they're making things with their hands for our energy systems, and they've been there for 45 years. And there's an auto plant that you're there, and when you go to an auto plant in Windsor, and there's families who have been working at an auto plant, and, you know, as someone said to me, there are parents that someday think, yeah, I don't know if I want my kid to make the hockey team this year because I don't know if we'll be able to pay the frickin' bill. Because they're worried about their job. That's the reality. So the reality is there are families that need to pay the rent. Like in my riding in Toronto Centre, which on average is $20,000 less, like they're end of the month people in Regent Park. So like, I get it. We got to think, but we have to respond to citizens who they can't make it to the end of the month. They can't, they're choosing between food and public transportation. Those are realities, and our economy is facing those challenges too. So I honestly think about AI every day and building this ecosystem and all that stuff. I also think how it can, that horizontal, how that impacts the auto industry and the steel industry and the advanced manufacturing industry, and how those families are going to put food on their table, where it means and what does that mean. And in rural areas, like we talk about data centers, we don't talk about, edge computing that's going to actually stop the digital divide. So there's a lot of things that matter that we got to take at the same time. So I just want you to recognize that part of my mandate is not just there, it's very much how does this stuff work today at kitchen tables for people who are, it's coming at them fast.
So let's talk about those people, because as someone who has just moved over from Mila after 4 years, I don't need to be convinced that there's huge potential in this technology, including for lots of sectors to raise overall productivity in Canada, GDP. But it turns out that a lot of Canadians actually might need to be convinced, because in lots of latest polls, we've seen numbers around like more than 80% of Canadians generally have concerns about AI. And even more, maybe I think shocking, I find, is 78% of Canadians really believe that AI might threaten their job, right? And so the very job you're talking about. So how do you convince them that this is something that is good for them ultimately?
Yeah, it's a great question. So just let me answer just three quick things. On the big picture answer, the history of tech, let's look back. The history of technology is there's always anxieties and disruptions. Every technology in the revolution in the past has ended up creating more jobs, increasing quality of life than the past. That doesn't mean that every technology has always been good. I'm not some kind of Pollyanna, but I'm talking about in the descriptive macro sense, okay? That's what technology developments have done. I'm not minimizing disruptions, displacements, and inequities, very real, or that everything that's happened has been perfect. We should analyze, there's been lots of gaps. And the last big technological shift that we had in the last 30 years with the digitization and social media, I think we're all aware that this was not the best possible of all outcomes all the time for all people. But nonetheless, from a job point of view, we have seen increases, which has been good. But we've also seen anxieties. So the idea that a new technology this powerful is causing anxiety is not a surprise. How do we alleviate the anxiety? And then how do we make sure it creates jobs? One, the alleviation, trust. That's why I go back to our principle of trust. First, they got to trust that they're safe, like their privacy is safe, their data is safe, their kids are safe, like it's okay to use this. Someone's not taking your information and trading on it and making money or violating your sensitive data. So that's something that we got to get right. So that's an urgent priority for us. So that's part of our legislative agenda. And two, you got to see AI for what it is, right? The literacy levels, anybody about what AI, look, we just started this thing, right? It was, at Mila, it wasn't until sort of that ChatGPT moment that people really started talking about. You were, but the rest of the world's just catching up to this thing. And businesses are catching up. Educators are catching up. Community, I get letters about it every day. So first we're going through a period of understanding of what it is, what it can do, how useful is it, and we're going to see a kind of up and down curve about anxiety. That means we got to have education, pardon me, I've been yapping all day. Education is going to be important, critical thinking, and how we train people to use it, and then you got to see practical use cases. Like here in Montreal, there's a company called Reveal that we were with a month ago, that does brain surgery. And during brain surgery, which is very delicate, when you're taking out a tumor from someone's brain, you're scraping tiny pieces of tissue away, very obviously sensitive. One of the biggest issues is you don't know if you've got the whole tumor. It's very dangerous to do a second surgery. It's expensive, it's dangerous, no one wants a second brain surgery. This tool uses light through AI, analyzes the tissue, and can tell if you've got all the cancer in real time and cuts down the second surgery. I would say that's a pretty good thing. That's a good use of AI. There's another company that, the average wait for a dermatologist, 26 days where I am. It's a long time. You can go and recognize if that mole should require the profile hits malignancy. And so it can save dramatic time. A doctor scribe, an AI scribing, when you're in the emergency room, 35% of the time a doctor does is she takes notes. The AI scribe can give notes that allows the doctor to listen more, see 30 to 40% more patients. The notes are instant. They give some better diagnosis, helping efficiency. Is that a good use of AI? I think people would like that to drive efficiencies. If their data isn't safe with that, no, right? So we got to show and demonstrate AI as a tool to serve people better. I think what we're seeing a lot of is a lot of examples of AI not serving people better, and that creates a lot of fear. So how does it work? And then does it create jobs? Look, there's going to be concern about that. I will say this, the fastest growing job sector in the country right now, and it's not all good news, is the digital innovation sector. There's about 800,000 Canadians working in the digital industries right now. In AI alone, the new numbers are about 150,000, and the latest numbers we've got is at about 3,300 AI companies. The last number we had 4 months ago was 2,500. So they're growing. And when you talk to AI and tech companies, their biggest challenge is they can't find enough people to work there, and like they're growing. So you're seeing a kind of, I'm going to use a fancy pants word because I'm in the Rialto, like a speciation of new companies. Like it is incredible to see the amount of entrepreneurial spirit. One thing I will notice when you see new companies is at universities, one of the changes we've seen more than anything, I bet you saw it at Mila, is the distance between researchers and starting a business has never been shorter. That CEOs or professors have said to us at universities, I never thought I'd be a CEO. I thought I'd be a researcher for my whole life. But now AI is giving me the chance to actually start a company. We met a great machine learning specialist at the University of Alberta. She's done an incredible, her research is on water purification systems, really, really important in rural Canada, on reserves all over the world, in the global south. She's like, I never thought I'd be a CEO, but now I use AI, my machine learning. This system allows us to have significantly better and more efficient ways to clean water. I started a company, I've raised $10 million, I've hired people, I'm a CEO and a professor. And then, as she said to us, the distance between research and starting a company is remarkable. And you see that our universities are now innovation zones in a way that we've never seen. Waterloo, Sherbrooke, there's lots of them, that Laval, there's lots of them here. That's a real asset. We've got to think about that a little more profoundly and systematically, because that's a way to create jobs. But But look, diffusing this across the horizontally and making sure that this is not a job displacer, but a job multiplier and a service multiplier is the challenge.
And do you think you have some good policy levers or instruments to actually make sure that happens?
So this is the biggest question. Like, let me just be candid. I have only been a politician for 6 months, so I'm still being candid. When does that stop? We are in, like, this is a really interesting moment, and one of the reasons why I was delighted to come here is we are in this moment where we've accelerated our national AI strategy because things are happening really quickly. The Prime Minister said, can you update our national AI strategy about 2 years earlier? So we launched this 30-day task force. Taylor's on it, as I say, and others are on it, to give with, training, education, research, commercialization, and like there's different aspects to it, and they're getting back to us in November. So first of all, we're learning on that. And this question is maybe the core question, which is skills training and adoption is going to be the thing that will really scale at a macro large level how this works, right? Because, if we get a couple things right for the tech sector, that will make a lot. We'll have some winners and we'll build some big companies, but it's one thing to create wealth and for some, and it's another thing to create quality of life for all. And that diffusion element is really the challenge. And it's hard. I'm not going to pretend that, Anna, we've got the switch and everyone's good. But one, the task force is on that. We also have a public task. You can go online. This is pretty gratifying. We put a form that takes about 30 minutes to fill out. And we had kind of estimates. Last year we had one that had 1,200 people fill something out on a much shorter form on AI last year. This takes about half an hour. It's pretty aggressively demanding. 6,500 people have filled it out in the first 20 days, which is crazy. It's triple or quadruple already what it will be, what we expected. But there's a demand. So we're listening, and I think, look, I'm working with Patty Hajdu, the Minister of Employment. What role does the federal government play in education and training? Those are mechanisms that we're looking at, but you are asking the exact right question, which is not can we deploy our ingenuity? Yes. Can we help commercialization? Are we going to build data infrastructures? I know that the last panel, there's questions about energy use, and are we thinking about all those things are key, and we're open about it. But how, on a mass level, do we make sure that this is a benefit? And this remains a foundational challenge. And I'll be frank, we're listening to people, and we have some mechanisms on that.
Okay, so let me. We have 2 minutes left. Let me just maybe close with a question. So I also happen to have a daughter at McGill who also happens to be in this room. So what's your message for the next generation? What is your message for young Canadians who are worried about how much attention and time they spend on social media, who are worried about potentially not thinking and learning enough because of AI and because they're using ChatGPT, who are worried about the job market they're entering?
So let me say, I'm not going to speak for you. This is an important question. And I'm going to answer, I have a minute and a half. I'm going to answer, no, because this matters. Look, my kid is, my son and daughter, who my daughter graduated from, they're lucky, okay? Like I was lucky. My grandfather came here in 1905 and couldn't speak English and had 8 kids. My father was the youngest of 8. My father passed away a number of years ago, in his late 80s. My grandfather worked in a sweatshop on Queen Street at a place called Stone Clothing on the 3rd floor of what is now the National Film Board. And my father pointed it out to me when I started my first business. And I was in my 20s thinking I was hot shit, and I wasn't. And he said, that's where your grandfather worked. And he sewed pockets to my suit for my bar mitzvah when I was 12. And he took me up to the sweatshop, and he sewed the pockets on my first suit for my bar mitzvah. Then we walked home. He lived in a place called Harbor Street, in a tiny home with 8 people, 8 kids. And he had to stop at every lamppost because he had a bad heart. And my grandfather died a couple months later from a heart attack. And he gave my father a better life. And my father was the first kid to go to university. And then I got to go to university, and my kid got to go to university. And I will tell you this, there are millions of people in my riding. There's people who are a generation back. They came here from Pakistan and different places, and they started businesses, and their kids are engineers now, and they're at McGill and University of Ottawa and University of Toronto. The first thing I would say is we should not in any way, I will never give up on the optimism, okay? Because my grandfather had no reason to be optimistic. But he was optimistic that he could get his family on the first rung of the economic ladder, despite huge obstacles. And the people that are coming to this country today, or the people who have been here since time immemorial, who have institutionalized obstacles against them, we got to make sure that everyone's got that opportunity. So what I tell my kids is it's tough, but it is going to be, we have a remarkable opportunity in this country. So I don't try to be too, we do not have the right to give up on the optimism that things could get better if we put our backs into it together. And I mean that sincerely. We have an incredible country, an incredible moment. Doesn't mean that things are perfect. They're deeply imperfect and on institutionalized ways. But together we've got to overcome these obstacles, because the people that came here and keep coming here are facing significantly more obstacles, but they believe. So what do I tell the kids? First of all, my kids have incredible opportunities, but there are lots of kids that don't. There are lots of kids that were my grandfather and my dad, right? Who were just like, they didn't have a dime. So I say, look, you got to work hard. You got to carry your values. And this is a great opportunity to engage with civil society, do public service, get involved, give back when you can. You're going to take a bunch of shit in your life. Who cares? Keep going. But this technology is a tool, and it can be a tool to build up our country if we get it right. If we decide to abdicate and not use it, we're probably going to miss a transformational moment. And if we do nothing, things will get worse. But you're going to talk to Maria later, like in the Philippines, and I've reported from the Philippines. Like, there are people out there that do not have what we have. So I tell my kids, this is your moment. And young people, this is the age of the entrepreneur. You have the tools, you have the country. We need to get in the fight. So that's what I tell them. Let's go. And when my generation screws up, kick our butts. And when your generation screws up, the next one will kick yours. But that doesn't mean we should not believe that we can do better. And that's the mission. So there you go.
Right. Thank you very much, Minister Zimin.
Thank you.